Well, I was thinking as Erica was up here energizing all of us that this is really like being at the gym in the morning, except that it's trying to get at your mind as opposed to your body. And I think that when we think about all the issues, I hope that at the end of today, at the end of these 2 days, you will have sort of an achy head, because we're tackling some of the toughest issues you can imagine. Look at yesterday when we looked at the whole issue of security, and we looked at AI and robotics, and today we're going to look at education and healthcare. So all of these are really intended to stretch your minds, and we hope you leave with as many questions, but also that we use these sessions to help you think about how does this apply to you. So today we have a very interesting panel and an interesting discussion about another very complex issue, energy. And the title, I think, today, at least the one that I had, was Energy, Energy, what are the options for a cleaner, safer world? When I looked at this, I said, why is this such a difficult issue? Why wouldn't everybody be on board? There's no discussion to be had. And yet we know that there's a lot of discussion going on, and a lot of contention, and a lot of complexity to what's going to bring us to a cleaner, safer world. And sometimes we have to think differently. I was listening a few months ago to the Chief of Staff of the military in the United States saying that the biggest issue that faced the United States was the issue of energy and the environment. I said, wow, interesting. So we hope this session will sort of, again, help us stretch our minds around these issues and try and help us think about this a little more deeply. We have two amazing panelists that are going to stretch your minds. I think I might follow David's role yesterday and go out into the audience and see if we can pull more questions and comments out of you as well as we go along. But again, feel free at any time to get up in front of the mics and we'll bring you into this discussion as well. So, what are we talking about here today with energy? On one hand, we're seeing probably the greatest concern over energy that we've ever seen. And we see a very fluctuating issue. At one point, it's peak oil and that's the end of oil. And the next thing we see, oh no, we've just discovered fracking and there's not a big problem. At one end, we see oil way up here and now we see the price way down here. Then we have another interesting development of clean energy. And so we see the green revolution starting to take hold in many different ways. And yet, with all of what's going on, wonderful new technology bringing in things, we still are stuck politically in terms of how do we begin to create a cleaner world? And what is it going to take for us to try and do that? So when we start to think about this, I'd like us to really think, how can we begin to make some breakthroughs with this? So we have with us today two very distinguished panelists. Cesar Romero is from the Philippine Shell, CEO and President of Shell Philippines, has been involved in this issue, what you might think of as a very traditional, but I think as you'll find out, Shell particularly has led the way through their scenario planning with some very imaginative ways of trying to understand where we're heading. Again, with good strategy, it's not where are we today, it's where do we want to be and how do we get there. And then Harish is a CEO of Cesar Foundation, focused a lot on solar energy, but also of how do we deliver this to people who don't have access to this. So what I'm going to do is ask each of them to sort of open up with a statement, give you a little better sense of what they're doing. And then I'll start asking a few questions that will provoke the discussion a little further. And then hopefully you will come into this as well. Okay? So why don't I start with you and we'll work our way around.
Thank you very much, Brad. Thanks for that good tee up to the session. Probably, if I may stretch the mind a little bit, I mean, the use of energy is vital to our daily lives. The lights we use, the power used to transmit this microphone, right? The air conditioning that we use to sit comfortably, the transport system that allowed us all to be here today. it all consumed energy. Yet, isn't it interesting to know that today, there are still about 1 billion people all over the world without access to electricity. Actually, the estimate is more like 1.2. A further 1 billion have unreliable or worse, unsafe access to electricity. There are about 3 billion people who still use solid fuel for cooking. Now, could you imagine the disparity between the developed world and those people who barely have any access to the most basic use of energy? Now, unfortunately, the reality of our life is our current energy systems, built over 2 centuries, have been built over hydrocarbon. At the moment, the current consumption is 30% coal, 30% oil, 20% gas. Even the small renewables component, about 5% is bio, which means it is burning of wood or burning of something that also releases CO2. And I won't go through the debate of the CO2, right? But I think the dilemma confronting all of us, and I'm very happy yesterday when I saw that climate change is one of those, is how do we ensure we're able to provide more and cleaner energy to these people who still don't have access to the most basic energies? How do we provide more energy, cleaner energy, in a manner that is sustainable, in a manner that's affordable, in a manner that allows us to have a planet that is sustainable for our future? So let me take a pause there. It is not an impossibility. It is challenging. It is difficult, but I think it's a good way to tee up the dilemma.
So you think this is from my perspective, a very solvable problem?
I won't say very. It's an open word. There are pathways with which it could be solved. It is not easy. It will require extensive and exhaustive collaboration across consumers, industry, and government. Okay, there are plausible. One of those things that we do in Shell is our scenario planning. There are plausible pathways with which it could be solved. But as I've said, it's not going to be a slam dunk or easy, because the infrastructure we have now, built over 2 centuries, is quite efficient in its own right, except that it did not take as much of the CO2 science when it was being developed. You know, one of my favorite analogies with this is, do you know that today, diesel is cheaper than 1 liter of water? Do you appreciate that? So the oil, you dig 2 kilometers down, west part of the Philippines, travel all the way here, you refine in a refinery that's worth about $5 billion. You move around, you sell in your regular petrol station at a price cheaper than 1 liter of water. And therefore, to be able to displace and change that system is a bit tricky. And that's why we need exhaustive collaboration between the various parties concerned. So anyway, let me take a pause there.
So not so much the technology does not seem to be the challenge.
There are technological hurdles. I'm not discounting that. I mean, for example, despite the lowering of the cost of solar, we're all very fond of solar, that's good, right? There are still industries that require, unfortunately, the use of oil, and that will continue to do so. Steel, iron manufacturing, okay? Production of plastic requires hydrocarbon. The production of insulation material that we need to have a more efficient world still requires hydrocarbon. So these are the stuff that we still need to grapple with and to be able to work with. We need to increase electrification. The transport system needs to be relooked at, right? Because our current transport system is heavily reliant on liquid hydrocarbon. The airline industry and the heavy goods industry all still require hydrocarbon. Unfortunately, there are still no airplanes that could be fueled with non-hydrocarbon fuels at the moment. Cruise ships, yes. In fact, we have a partnership with one of the cruise lines in Europe where it is already using LNG, which has a 50% less CO2. So there are possibilities, but yeah, technology is available, but it's not a very easy process because there are some that really just has some natural, not natural technical constraints at the moment. And some of the examples I give. So.
So that's a good picture of where we've come from and where we are. Harish, you've spent your life, it sounds like, working on the new alternatives and opening up some new pathways to this. Tell us about both the foundation and its work and what you're doing, but also what this represents in terms of this question that we're trying to wrestle with about the future of energy.
So the cost of this and cost of oil, we are not talking of the cost of externalities in the cost of oil at all. That's not been priced today. And I think it's a false pricing that goes into the incentives that leads to all of us enjoying cheaper oil. And that needs to get into. So today, I won't agree with the efficiency part. I think it's just that we're priced in a different manner. And I would say that there are ways. Unfortunately, today what happens is, I mean, the whole statistics of 1 billion people or 1.2 billion people without energy access, that's because we are unfortunately putting energy as the centerpiece. Energy is not democratized today, and it's not a level playing field. We should take away the concept putting energy in the middle, putting what is energy going to be used for. And that is why today the way it has gone, and why do 8 men own as much as 3 billion people in the world, is because we have not democratized the process of ownership. And we believe that sustainable energy breaks those myths of present delivery mechanism, decentralizes the way energy can be provided, where the poor become owners, where the poor become innovators, the poor become entrepreneurs, rather than poor being looked as source of cheap labor, poor being looked as beneficiaries, and poor being takers of subsidies. I think sustainable energy in a decentralized fashion today for most of the world can make sure that we do have an inclusive way of doing it, and today it can be done. That can be easily done if the private sector, if the civil society and the governments, and we don't need to have more than 15 to 20 years to do that actually. Unfortunately, and we can do that in 50, because today we are stuck. How do we use the existing legacy? We need to come out of our mindset and say, okay, the legacy was there, you have transmission lines, you have core, let's relook at it. Otherwise, we're not going to create a level playing field for the poor, and that's exactly present way of economics, and delivery has not worked, and that is exactly why the divide between the rich and poor is increasing in the world. So please challenge me and tell me, is there other ways where the rich and poor is not happening? And we believe that sustainable energy democratizes the delivery of health, democratizes the delivery of education, democratizes the delivery of making a level playing field for the livelihoods to happen for the poor to get out of poverty. And that's exactly what we are trying to do.
Thank you. That's a great way of stretching our minds.